Have you ever had a moment so humiliating, so gut-wrenching that it rewired your entire identity in a single second? That was me. A Thursday night. A dinner I'd planned, catered, and cleaned for, while my husband played host like he was a king holding court. Ryan always had this way of commanding attention, the smile, the charm, the jokes. People fell for it. I used to fall for it too. Until I heard the words that flipped my world inside out. He was sitting at the head of our long dining room table, swirling a glass of Merlot. His business partners clustered around him in designer suits and fake laughs. I was in the kitchen wiping down the marble counter when I heard them talking about the early days of the company. Back when we had nothing, one of them said, chuckling. Just 4 guys, a dream, and your insane belief we could build an empire. Ryan laughed, loudly. Too loudly. I heard his fork clatter against the plate. Then his voice, clear as day. Emily? She's great with the kids and laundry, but let's be honest. She's just a housewife. Totally useless when it comes to real work. They roared. The kind of laughter that comes from shared arrogance. And in that moment, standing barefoot on the cold tile floor, still wearing my apron, I felt something crack inside me. Not break. Crack. Like the first fissure in a dam. Quiet but dangerous. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even walk into the room and throw the wine in his smug face, though God knows I wanted to. I just stood there, staring at the backsplash I'd designed myself, breathing through my teeth like I'd been sucker punched. Because that's what it was. A betrayal. Not of love. We were long past romance, if I'm being honest. But of respect. Of history. Of sacrifice. See, what Ryan conveniently forgot in his little comedy routine was that 10 years ago we started with nothing. He had a dream and charm, sure, but he also had terrible credit, a DUI on record, and no legal way to register the business. So he came to me, the woman who had just given birth to our second child, who had paused her marketing career to build a home life while he chased his Silicon Valley fantasy. He asked me to put my name on the paperwork. Just until things settle, he'd said. It'll mean everything to me. And I did it. No lawyers, no questions, just trust. For the next 5 years, I stayed in the background. I raised our kids, managed our lives. I cooked, I cleaned, I played therapist and chauffeur, all while he turned our living room into an office and hosted late-night calls with investors. I made it work because I believed in him, in us. I never used my name on those papers as leverage, never reminded him of the legal weight I carried. I let him lead, and I supported him, like a good wife should. But that night changed everything. I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above our bed, listening to Ryan snore beside me like he hadn't just shredded 10 years of loyalty in one sentence. My mind wouldn't shut off. I kept replaying his words, his laugh, the dismissive way they all chuckled like I was just part of the furniture. And then, around 4 a.m., I got up, went into the study, and opened the fireproof lockbox we kept under the desk. It had everything. The LLC registration, the operating agreement, tax documents. Every last one had my name at the top. Not his. For 5 years, I'd kept that truth buried like it didn't matter. But now it was everything. By the time the sun rose, I had a plan. I got dressed in my sharpest blouse, pulled out my old leather heels from the back of the closet, and straightened my hair. Not for him. For me. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Calm, polished, focused. No more apron, no more apologies. Just a quiet storm gathering strength. I dropped the kids off at school like nothing had happened. Then I drove to their downtown office, the one I'd never been invited to. It was in a sleek, modern building with glass panels and steel accents. The kind of place you build when you think you've made it. The receptionist smiled politely, probably assuming I was there to drop off lunch. Instead, I said, "I'm here for a meeting. Tell them Emily Carter would like a moment." She paused. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Then she picked up the phone. And just like that, The cracks in Ryan's perfect world started to split wide open. The elevator ride up to the top floor felt longer than it should have. My reflection in the mirrored walls stared back at me. Not scared, not angry, just resolute. Years of swallowing resentment had hardened something in me. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't second-guessing myself. I was done playing small. When the doors slid open, the lobby of their floor was dead quiet. Sleek black furniture, modern art on the walls, a long hallway of glass-walled offices. Ryan's assistant, a young guy with slicked back hair and too much cologne, stood to greet me, clearly surprised. "Mrs. Carter," he said cautiously, like I was a ticking bomb. I didn't blame him. I was. "I'll be using the conference room," I said, walking past him without waiting for permission. "Let them know I'm here." The room had a long mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin. I took my time placing the folders, thick, tabbed, organized, at each chair. Everything I needed to say was inside those pages. I wasn't here to argue or defend myself. I was here to remind them of the truth they'd conveniently forgotten. It didn't take long. The door opened, and one by one they walked in. Ryan last, looking confused, half amused. "Emily?" he said with a grin like I'd brought cupcakes. "What's going on?" I didn't look at him. Instead, I gestured to the chairs. "Gentlemen, please, take a seat." They sat. All four of them. Ryan, plus the three partners who'd laughed along with him the night before. Daniel, Bryce, and Anton. They were all wearing the same smug expressions I'd seen 100 times. Men who believed they ran the world. I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I slid into the head seat, opened my folder, and tapped the first page. "Before we begin, I want to thank you for coming. I know you weren't expecting me. I'm sure you thought of me as nothing more than Ryan's housewife, someone who stays home, folds laundry, and doesn't know what an operating agreement looks like." They shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. I continued. "But what you may not remember, or perhaps never knew, is that when this company was registered 5 years ago, Ryan's name couldn't be on the paperwork due to legal complications, so he asked me to sign. I became the registered owner, the legal manager, the sole signatory on all corporate documents. Every filing with the state, every tax return, every piece of paper that legitimized this company has my name on it." I paused, letting that settle. Anton opened his folder first, then Bryce, then Daniel. The pages rustled, and with every flip, their faces lost color. Ryan's smirk was gone. He looked like he was trying to figure out if this was a joke. It wasn't. I leaned back slightly. "So before we talk about who's useless, maybe let's ask ourselves, who actually owns this company?" Ryan stood up abruptly, face red, voice rising. "What the hell are you doing, Emily?" I didn't flinch. "You said I was just a housewife. I'm showing you what that housewife is capable of." The room was dead silent. I stood, collected my copy of the documents, and looked each man in the eye. "You have 2 options. You can continue under the current legal structure, with me, Emily Carter, as the official owner and managing partner. Or you can resign and cash out your equity. I'll have the lawyers prepare both scenarios." Daniel started to speak, something about revisiting the agreement. But I cut him off. "There's nothing to revisit. These documents have been in place for 5 years. You all signed them. You either didn't read them, or you assumed I'd never use them. That was your mistake." Ryan followed me out into the hallway, voice low and furious. "You're humiliating me." "No," I said calmly, turning to face him. "You humiliated me. I just returned the favor, legally and in full view." He looked like he wanted to scream, but couldn't form the words. I walked away, heels clicking against the tile. Each step felt like shedding a layer of silence I'd worn for too long. Over the next week, chaos reigned at the office. Lawyers were called. Meetings were held behind closed doors. 2 of the partners, Bryce and Anton Habo, chose to walk, quietly accepting my buyout offer. They didn't want to be part of what they called a domestic drama, but I knew better. They were terrified. Of me. Of what I might do next. Daniel stayed. To his credit, he was smart enough to see the bigger picture. The company was stable, the structure legal, and for the first time in its existence, fully led by someone who hadn't just sacrificed for it, but understood how to protect it. As for Ryan, he moved into a hotel, kept texting, emailing, begging to talk. I ignored him, until he showed up at my front door one rainy Thursday with a look I hadn't seen in years. Desperation. His hair was damp from the rain, clinging to his forehead, and for the first time in years, Ryan didn't look like the polished, confident CEO the world knew him to be. He looked like a man who had just realized his foundation was built on sand, and it was finally collapsing. I didn't say a word as I opened the door, just stared at him, arms crossed, waiting to hear what nonsense he had rehearsed this time. He held a paper cup of coffee in one hand, like it was some kind of peace offering. "Can we talk?" he asked, quieter than I expected. I let him in, not because I wanted to, but because part of me needed to see how far he'd fall before he finally admitted the truth. Not just about what he'd said that night, but about who he'd become. He sat on the couch like it was foreign to him. The same couch I'd folded laundry on, cried on, nursed both our kids on. He hadn't noticed it in years. "I messed up," he began, rubbing his hands together. "I was drunk. I was trying to impress the guys. I didn't mean any of it." "You didn't mean it," I repeated slowly. "So what? The truth just slipped out accidentally." He flinched. I could see it in his eyes. That flicker of guilt, of panic, of losing something he never thought was at risk. He used to believe I was part of the furniture. Permanent. Predictable. Forgiving. Not anymore. "I've been under pressure," he continued. "The company's been expanding fast. I've been trying to keep everything together. And yet," I cut in, "the only thing you managed to hold together was your ego. At my expense." He didn't deny it. Just stared down at the coffee cup in his hands, like maybe if he looked hard enough, he could find the right words at the bottom. "I get it now," he finally said. "What you did." It shook me. I thought I built something with my bare hands, but you were the safety net all along, and I never even looked down to notice. I sat across from him, hands in my lap, calm, detached. "You didn't look down because you assumed I'd always be there to catch you." There was a long silence after that, the kind that presses on your chest. Ryan looked up, his voice softer than I remembered. "I want to fix this. Come back. Let's work together. You can be involved now. Officially. You've earned it." I almost laughed. "You think I want to join the company now?" I said. "Ryan, I own it. I don't need to join anything. I am the company." His eyes darted to mine, searching for something familiar. The woman who used to apologize when she spoke too firmly, who used to smile politely when his friends ignored her at parties. That woman was gone. Still, a part of me hesitated. Not because I doubted myself, but because I'd spent so many years being we. Our family. Our company. It was hard to erase that grammar overnight. "I'm not trying to take it back from you," he added quickly. "I'm just saying, maybe this doesn't have to be the end. We could still be partners, in business, maybe even in life." That last part was said too softly, like even he didn't believe it, like he was trying to test the words and see how they tasted, and for a split second I felt it. That strange ache. Not for him, but for the years I'd poured into someone who only started seeing me after I walked away. The irony was cruel. He needed to lose me to realize I was never just a placeholder, but my silence told him what he already feared. When he stood to leave, he looked older, deflated, like the realization of what he'd lost was finally sinking in. At the door, he turned one last time. "You really don't want to fix us?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "There is no us anymore, Ryan. There's just you, and the man who underestimated the woman who built his empire." He left without another word. I closed the door and exhaled. Not with relief, not with triumph, but with a strange, powerful calm. I had nothing to prove to him. Not anymore. He'd already seen what I was capable of when I stopped making myself small for his comfort. But the fallout was far from over. The next morning, a legal notice arrived at the office. From his lawyer, Ryan was challenging the company ownership. When I first saw the envelope, thick and formal with his lawyer's name etched in delicate serif font across the top, my stomach twisted. Not with fear, but with cold disbelief. It was barely a week since Ryan stood in my living room asking for reconciliation, dangling empty words like us and partners. And now he was trying to rip back control of the company I'd carried for him when no one else would. I opened it with shaking hands, but steady resolve. The letter claimed Ryan had been misled during the initial registration process, that I'd acted in bad faith by keeping ownership of the company despite playing no material role in its development. According to him, I had exploited a legal technicality to seize power I didn't deserve. I laughed, out loud, bitterly, because if that wasn't the most textbook example of projection, I didn't know what was. He wasn't just trying to win back control. He was trying to rewrite history, erase the long nights I spent drafting business plans while he tinkered with code. Forget the time I flew across the country, 7 months pregnant, to pitch to a VC investor because he had a panic attack and couldn't face them. Pretend I was never there when his car got repossessed, and I had to bail him out to keep his name off the bankruptcy list. He wanted to delete all of it, turn me into a footnote. But I wasn't a footnote anymore. Still, I wasn't stupid. The legal system doesn't reward emotional truths. It rewards paper trails. And luckily I had plenty. Within a day, my lawyer, Ava, a sharp, ruthless woman I'd known since college, drafted a response so precise and venom-laced it read like poetry. She attached all the original formation documents, dated and signed. Emails from Ryan begging me to use my name because of his outstanding debt. Witness statements from friends who remembered our late-night brainstorming sessions in the garage. Financial logs showing I'd invested the seed money while he was dodging collectors. The foundation of his argument crumbled the second we hit send. Still, the emotional toll was another matter. That week was a haze of anger, meetings, legal terms, and long nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how the man I once shared a bed with could stoop this low. But what haunted me most wasn't the lawsuit. It was the realization that Ryan had never seen me as an equal. Not when we built the company. Not when I supported him through every failure. Not even now, when I had the power. To him, I was still just the housewife who got lucky. But I wasn't alone. That same week, 2 former employees, women of course, reached out. They had seen the news circulating in industry gossip blogs, little murmurs about a CEO shakeup and a silent partner stepping into the spotlight. One of them, Laura, told me she'd quit 2 years ago because of Ryan's behavior. His constant interruptions, his tendency to dismiss her in meetings, the way he took credit for her work during client calls. "I'm glad it's you now," she said. "Someone who actually gets it." That meant more than I expected. Because as much as I wanted revenge, I also wanted change. I didn't just want to own the company. I wanted to rebuild it into something better. So I leaned in. I held an all-staff meeting, my first as CEO. I walked into the office in a navy blazer, heels clicking against the floor, head held high. The same people who once ignored me as Ryan's wife now watched in silent anticipation. And I told them the truth. "I'm not here because I'm married into this company," I said. "I'm here because I helped build it. Quietly. Invisibly. But not anymore." I laid out my plans for restructuring, fairer promotions, proper HR protocols, a more inclusive hiring pipeline. The room was quiet at first. Then a few people clapped. Then more. And for the first time I felt something I hadn't in years. Seen. But just when I thought things were finally turning around, a new email landed in my inbox. This one wasn't from a lawyer or an employee. It was from her. Subject line: "You don't know everything about Ryan." No name, no explanation, just a date and time, and an address. My heart slammed against my ribs. Because the address, it wasn't in Austin. It was in Houston, and the name of the sender, hidden behind a burner account. I stared at the email for over an hour. Every time I hovered over the delete button, something deep in my gut stopped me. The message was simple. No threat, no accusations, not even a hint of emotion. Just a date, a time, and an address 3 hours away. But it buzzed in my chest like a live wire. Because if there was one thing I'd learned after 10 years of marriage to Ryan Carter, it was this. When someone tells you don't know everything, you probably don't. The next morning I drove to Houston in silence. No music, no podcasts. Just the sound of my tires humming along the highway and the occasional beat of my heart jumping every time I thought about turning back. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not my lawyer, not my sister, not even Ava, who would have likely told me to ignore it and focus on the lawsuit. But I couldn't. I had to know. The address led me to a modest suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but neat and lived in. The kind of place where families held block parties and kids rode bikes until dusk. I parked across the street and stared at the small, white bungalow with blue shutters, my hands trembling on the wheel. I almost didn't get out. But then the door opened, and there she was, late 30s, maybe early 40s, wavy chestnut hair pulled into a loose bun, tired eyes, holding the hand of a little girl, no older than 5, clutching a purple stuffed unicorn. The child stared at me with innocent curiosity. The woman, though, her gaze was something else. Apology, guilt, a strange familiarity. She stepped onto the porch slowly, like she expected me to bolt. "You came," she said softly, her voice barely louder than the wind. I nodded, throat dry. "Are you Madeline?" she said. "But I think you should come inside." I followed her in, heart pounding against my ribs like a drumbeat. The house smelled of lavender and laundry detergent. Simple, warm, too normal for what I was about to hear. We sat in her small kitchen. The little girl, Amelia, I learned, curled up on the couch watching cartoons, while Madeline poured coffee with shaking hands. "I'm not here to hurt you," she began. "I hesitated for weeks before sending that email, but when I saw what Ryan was doing to you, how he was trying to steal back the company, you deserve to know. I didn't speak. I just waited." She swallowed hard and then said it. "I was with him for 4 years, on and off." The words hit like a slap. Not because I hadn't suspected infidelity at some point. There were always little signs. Things I brushed off. Business trips that lasted longer than scheduled. Phone calls he took in the garage. The sudden gym obsession. But hearing it, confirmed, was like someone shoved my head under water and didn't let go. I clenched my jaw. "So you were one of his affairs?" She winced. "I didn't know he was married when we met. He told me he was separated, that he and his wife were only staying together for the kids and image." She paused. I believed him for longer than I care to admit. But eventually, I found out the truth. I left him after that. For good. I studied her face, looking for cracks, lies, anything to make this easier to hate her. But there was only regret. "And the child?" I asked, though I already knew. Her voice broke. "Amelia is his daughter." The floor felt like it shifted under me. My ears rang. All the blood in my body seemed to rush to my temples. Ryan had a child, a whole other child, and never said a word. "He never told me," I whispered. "I know," she said quietly. "That's why I reached out. He hasn't seen her in over 2 years. Barely sends support. He pretends she doesn't exist. But now that you've taken the company, he's scared. I think he'll come crawling back to us too. I needed you to hear it from me before that happened." I stood there for a long time, staring out her window, watching leaves fall from the tree in the front yard. I should have cried, or screamed, or thrown something, but I didn't, because somewhere deep inside, I already knew Ryan was this kind of man. I just didn't want to admit it. Madeline handed me a small folder before I left. Paternity test, correspondence, old photos, proof. As I got in the car and drove back to Austin, my fingers clutched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Ryan hadn't just betrayed me. He'd built a second life while I was home folding laundry and packing school lunches. And now I had to decide what to do with that truth. The moment I walked through my front door, I knew I couldn't keep this secret. Not for his sake. Not for mine. I had spent too many years swallowing pain and painting on a brave face while Ryan played the role of a successful husband with a doting wife in the background. Not anymore. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream into a pillow or down a bottle of wine. I simply laid the folder Madeline had given me on the kitchen table and stared at it, as if it were a loaded weapon. Because in a way it was. Proof that Ryan wasn't just a cruel partner. He was a liar on a scale I hadn't even imagined. The next morning I met with my lawyer. I told her everything. I showed her the paternity test, the emails, the photos of Ryan and Amelia at a water park 3 years ago, the ones he probably thought had disappeared into the digital void. Her lips pressed into a tight line as she sifted through the contents. "This changes things," she said. "It doesn't affect the corporate ownership, but it gives us leverage, especially if he tries to claim moral damages or paint you as the unreasonable party." "He already has," I said bitterly. "But I want more than leverage." She raised an eyebrow. "I want to expose him, not just legally, publicly. I want people to see who he really is." She hesitated. "That's a dangerous game." I leaned forward. "He called me a useless housewife in front of his friends, while living a double life and abandoning a child. He built his empire on my back, and then tried to push me off the throne. I'm done playing nice." And with that we drafted the press release. It was factual, cold, clean. A statement from the legal owner of the Carter Group, Emily Carter, regarding recent changes in management. I explained my role in founding the company, the legal restructuring, and clarified that Ryan Carter no longer had decision-making authority. There was a line, carefully worded, about the importance of transparency and integrity in leadership, a nod to his personal conduct without outright accusations. But I knew the rest would come. And it did. Within 48 hours, the story was everywhere. Business blogs picked it up. Local papers reached out. Tech gossip accounts started posting side-by-side photos of me and Ryan, dissecting every moment from our recent past like vultures. But the biggest blow came when one of Ryan's former assistants, a quiet girl named Lacey, came forward anonymously and confirmed what many suspected. Ryan had a history of workplace affairs, inappropriate messages, and manipulative behavior. She had kept receipts, literally. The board, or rather, what remained of it, reached out in panic. Investors wanted answers. Clients started to pull back. And Ryan? He lost it. He showed up at my house, pounding on the door like a madman, yelling loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I didn't let him in. I watched from behind the curtain as he screamed that I had ruined his life, destroyed his reputation, that I'd crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Maybe he was right. But I didn't care. I'd crossed plenty of lines for him. Lines that cost me my career, my confidence, and nearly my sanity. This one. This was mine. My boundary. My battle line. The next day I received a cease and desist letter from his lawyer. He accused me of defamation, emotional cruelty, and intentionally sabotaging his future prospects. I handed it straight to my legal team and told them to crush it. But something about the letter didn't sit right. It was too emotional, too desperate. Ryan never showed vulnerability, not unless he was trying to manipulate someone. And then I remembered what Madeline had said. "I think he'll come crawling back to us too." It hit me like a jolt. What if this wasn't just about the company anymore? What if he was trying to rewrite the entire story, to cast himself as a victim and rebuild his image from the ruins? That night, I logged into our old shared cloud account. I had forgotten I still had access. It was mostly business files and family photos. Nothing suspicious, until I opened a folder labeled Archive. Inside were videos. Dozens of them. Some work-related, some not. One caught my eye. It was labeled Carter Legacy Pitch Draft. I clicked it, and there he was, Ryan sitting in a sleek office, speaking to the camera like he was already a fallen hero in a documentary. "Sometimes," he said, "when a man builds something great, people around him feel left behind. They lash out, even the people you trust the most." My stomach turned. "I made mistakes," he continued, voice trembling. "But I always put the company first. Always. And now I'm being punished for that." He looked directly into the lens. "I'll rebuild. From nothing if I have to. I'm not done yet." He was planning something. A comeback, a smear campaign, maybe even a new startup to rebrand himself, one that painted me as the scorned wife who got lucky, not the woman who built the empire he squandered. My hands were shaking. I had won the battle. But Ryan? He wasn't done with the war. It took 3 more months, 2 court hearings, and a flood of PR chaos. But in the end, justice didn't just knock on Ryan Carter's door. It bulldozed it down. Emily stood tall on the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters, as the judge's ruling echoed in her ears. Full ownership of the Carter Group is affirmed. Ryan Carter's countersuit is dismissed with prejudice. Ryan had come in smug, dressed in a $1,000 suit and a smirk. But the smirk had slipped when his secret bank account in the Caymans was exposed, followed by the revelation that he used company funds to pay off Amelia, the mother of his child, during board meetings. His fall was swift. Investors fled. The IRS launched an audit. His face, once celebrated on magazine covers, now appeared under headlines like "The Narcissist Behind the Curtain." His apology tour fell flat. No one bought the rebranding attempt. Even Amelia had stopped returning his calls. By the end of it all, Ryan was forced to sell his remaining assets to pay legal fees. The man who once called Emily a useless housewife now lived in a furnished sublet in a quiet suburb, forgotten, disgraced, irrelevant. Emily, meanwhile, had changed. She wasn't angry anymore. She didn't need to be. She had reclaimed her name, her legacy, her future, and that was more powerful than revenge. At her side stood Madeline, her loyal assistant turned COO, and Jordan, her new head of strategy, a young genius who reminded her of who she used to be, ambitious, unafraid, and unapologetically brilliant. Emily's revenge had been methodical, elegant, and devastating. Not a single lie, not one false move. She released the full audit report to the media, every mismanaged fund, every unethical deal. She backed it with facts, timelines, and witnesses. When Ryan tried to accuse her of planting evidence, her team played recordings of his own voice bragging about how no one reads the fine print. It wasn't just court that buried him, it was public opinion. The man who tried to rewrite history had been fact-checked to death. His final mistake, underestimating her. While he schemed in back rooms and whispered to lawyers, Emily built an alliance. She secured investors who believed in her vision, not his legacy. She charmed the press without a single scandal. She outclassed him at every turn. And when the final ruling came down, she didn't celebrate with champagne or vindictive speeches. She simply looked him in the eyes and said, "You should have left me behind when you still had the chance." 6 months later, Carter Group had been rebranded as E. Carter Innovations, sleek, modern, inclusive. Under Emily's leadership, it became a case study in ethical entrepreneurship. Clients returned. New ones followed. She moved into a new home overlooking the city. High above the noise, the gossip, the shadows of the past. Her son, Miles, visited on weekends from college. They were closer now, stronger. As for Ryan, rumors spread he was trying to start a podcast about overcoming betrayal. It had 20 subscribers. One of them was probably him. One night, Emily received an email from a burner address. No subject, just one line. "You win. I hope you're proud." She didn't reply, because pride wasn't what she felt. She felt peace. On a sunny afternoon, Emily walked past the old Carter Group building. A new name adorned the glass. E. Carter HQ. She paused. A former colleague, someone who once laughed when Ryan mocked her, passed by and awkwardly nodded. She smiled politely, then turned to Madeline and said with quiet satisfaction, "Funny how just a housewife ended up owning the whole damn empire," and walked away, heels clicking, head high, her shadow no longer behind a man, but stretching forward into a future that belonged to her and her alone.